The morning I found out I was worth $4 million, I was standing in my kitchen in a bathrobe that had seen better days, waiting for my coffee to finish brewing. That's how these things happen, I've learned. Not in a lawyer's office with mahogany furniture and a box of tissues on the desk. Not with a phone call you've been expecting. It comes when you're in your old bathrobe, half awake, and the coffee is taking too long. My name is Beverly. I'm 63 years old, recently retired from 31 years of teaching 5th grade at Whitmore Elementary in Knoxville, Tennessee. I have a bad knee that predicts rain better than any weather app, a tabby cat named Biscuit who ignores me unless it's dinner time, and until 8 months ago, I thought the most exciting financial news I'd ever receive was when my pension finally cleared. I was wrong about that. My best friend Hazel and I met the first week of college, 1980, in a laundry room in Carver Hall at the University of Tennessee. She'd shrunk a sweater. I had the same sweater in blue and hadn't washed it yet. We laughed about it for 42 years. Hazel never married. She'd come close twice, she always said. But both times she'd looked at the man across from her and thought, I'd rather be reading. So she read. She built a career in pharmaceutical consulting that took her to Seattle, then to Boston, then eventually back south to Chattanooga, about an hour and a half from me. We had lunch every few weeks. We talked on the phone on Sunday mornings. I knew everything about her life, and she knew everything about mine, including the parts I wasn't proud of. She got sick 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, which, if you've ever watched someone you love get that diagnosis, you know what it means. It means fast. It means you don't get to say everything you wanted to say, or if you do, you're saying it while they're exhausted, and the light in the room feels too bright, and nothing comes out the way you meant it. I drove to Chattanooga every weekend her last 6 months. I sat with her. I brought her the lemon shortbread cookies she liked from a bakery on Market Street. Near the end, I mostly just held her hand while she slept. She passed in March. I went home and cried for 2 weeks and then went through the motions of the rest of spring and summer, teaching my last semester before retirement, going through the end-of-year routines with my students, attending Hazel's small memorial in June when her other friends had gathered themselves enough to organize one. My son called a few times. My daughter-in-law called once. They were sympathetic in the efficient way people are when the grief isn't theirs. Which brings me back to the kitchen, the bathrobe, the coffee. I'd gotten a letter the week before from an attorney's office in Chattanooga. I'd left it on the counter because I assumed it was something to do with a charity Hazel had mentioned, some paperwork I'd need to sign. I'd been slow about opening mail since she died. There was always a chance something in an envelope would make it more real. But that Tuesday morning in October, I finally opened it while the coffee brewed, and I read it 3 times before I believed it. Hazel had left me her estate. All of it. The condo in Chattanooga, the investment accounts, everything. After taxes and the small bequest she'd made to her church and 2 local scholarships, what remained for me was just over $4 million. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Biscuit came and sniffed my hand. I hadn't known. She'd never said a word, not once in 42 years. The attorney's letter explained that Hazel had updated her will 3 years before she died, when her diagnosis was still uncertain, and she was thinking clearly about what she wanted. She had no children, no siblings left, no close family. She'd written a letter that came with the legal documents, and in it she said, "You're the one who always showed up, Bev. The condo and the money are just me showing up for you." I cried again. Different crying than before. The kind that's mixed with something that feels almost like guilt. I called my son that afternoon. My son. I'll call him my son because that's how I've always thought of him. Though of course he has a name, he's 41, lives about 20 minutes from me in Knoxville with his wife and their 2 teenagers. We're close, or we were. I thought we were. He's always been the organized one, the planner, the one who researches everything before he buys anything. I used to think that was a virtue. He picked up on the second ring. I told him about the letter. I told him about the 4 million. There was a pause on the line that lasted just a beat too long. "That's incredible, Mom," he said. "Hazel really did that. She really did. Have you talked to a financial advisor yet?" I hadn't even gotten off the kitchen floor yet. "Not yet, honey. I just found out." "You should do that soon," he said. "You don't want to make any mistakes with something like this." It seemed practical, reasonable. I thanked him for the advice and we hung up. He texted me an hour later with the name of a financial advisor he'd looked up. I thought it was sweet. I should have noticed the timeline. He'd had time to look up a financial advisor within an hour of learning his mother had $4 million. But I was still on the kitchen floor, emotionally, even though my body had since moved to the couch. I wasn't thinking about timelines. The next few weeks passed quietly. I met with the attorney in Chattanooga, signed the necessary documents, began the process of transfer. The condo would take longer. I wasn't sure I wanted to sell it. It felt like a place that still held something of Hazel, and I wasn't ready to let go of that. The attorney was patient and kind and never once made me feel like I was being slow. My son and his wife started coming by more often. Sunday dinners, which we'd had irregularly before, became a weekly thing. I didn't question it. I liked the company. Retirement was lonelier than I'd expected, and cooking for one is a particular kind of sadness that people don't talk about enough. One Sunday in November, about 6 weeks after I'd gotten the letter, they stayed later than usual. The kids had gone home. My grandchildren drive themselves now, which still startles me, and we were sitting at the kitchen table with the remainder of a bottle of wine. My daughter-in-law mentioned something about home renovations. Her kitchen was dated, she said. They've been wanting to update it for years. "Maybe now you could help us," my son said. Not asking, exactly. Just floating it out there, the way you test the temperature of water before you step in. "Let's just see how everything settles first," I said. He nodded, dropped it. But something in me noticed it. The visits kept coming. Casual conversations kept drifting toward money. Always gently, always with reasonable cover. The kitchen renovation became mentions of their older car, their younger daughter's college fund, a business idea my son had been sitting on. Nothing demanding. Nothing I could point to and call wrong. Then came the Wednesday I changed everything. My daughter-in-law had forgotten her reading glasses at my house the Sunday before. She texted me Monday asking if I'd found them. I had. They were on the side table in the living room, and I texted back that I'd dropped them by. She said no rush, she'd pick them up Thursday. Fine. Wednesday afternoon I drove over anyway. I had a casserole I'd made too much of, and dropping off the glasses at the same time seemed efficient. I have a key to their house, the same way they have a key to mine. I knocked, got no answer, assumed no one was home, and let myself in to leave the casserole in the refrigerator and the glasses on the counter. Their home office is right off the kitchen. The door was open. I heard my son's voice and assumed he was on a work call. I wasn't trying to listen. I was moving quietly so I wouldn't interrupt him. And then I heard him say my name, and I stopped. "She doesn't need $4 million, he was saying. "She's 63, she's got a pension, she's got Medicare in 2 years. What is she going to do with all of it? By the time she's 80, half of it will just be sitting there." A pause. His wife's voice, lower. "So what are you thinking?" "Power of attorney," he said. "She trusts us. If we frame it as protecting her, what if she gets sick? What if she can't manage it herself? She'll think it's practical. And then? Then we manage it. For her, officially." I stood in the kitchen holding a casserole dish and I couldn't feel my hands. "She gave us the key to her house," his wife said. "She still doesn't know how to update the software on her own laptop. This isn't hard." "I'll bring it up at Christmas," my son said. "Sentimental time of year." She'll be more agreeable. I left. I set the casserole on their porch. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd made it and I didn't want it to go to waste. Then I drove home and sat in my driveway for a long time. I thought about the pause on the phone when I told him about Hazel's money, the financial advisor name he'd sent within the hour, the kitchen renovation, the business idea, the escalating Sunday dinners. I thought about the key they had to my house. I thought about my laptop, which I'd let my son update twice this year because I could never figure out how to navigate the new operating system. I'm a fifth-grade teacher. I've been reading people for 31 years. I know when a child is pretending to understand something they don't. I know when someone is playing a long game. I just hadn't let myself see it because I've been grieving. And grief makes you want people around you so badly that you forgive them things you haven't even confirmed yet. I didn't forgive this. Not then. The first call I made was to my own attorney, not the one in Chattanooga. My personal attorney, a woman named Helen who'd handled my will and the sale of our family house after my husband passed. I hadn't needed her in years, but I had her card. I told her what I'd heard. I wanted to understand my options. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good thing you called before Christmas." I almost laughed. Almost. Helen walked me through everything. She told me that without my consent, no one could obtain power of attorney over my affairs. I would have to sign for it. She told me that if someone was attempting to access my accounts or devices without my knowledge, that was a different matter. She told me I should change the passcodes on everything and, if I was genuinely concerned about the laptop, to have someone independent look at it. I dropped the laptop at a computer repair shop the next morning. Small place, locally owned, run by a young man who reminded me of my students, slightly disheveled, clearly smart. I told him I just wanted to make sure everything was as it should be. He called me 2 days later. There was remote access software installed on my laptop. It had been installed about 4 months ago, around the time my son had last helped me with the operating system update. Whoever had access could see everything I typed, every email, every time I'd opened the document where I kept my financial login notes. I sat in the parking lot of the repair shop and I thought about Hazel. I thought about what she would say. Probably something wry and sharp, and then she'd tell me to have a cookie and get moving. So I got moving. I bought a new laptop from Best Buy and paid for setup in the store. I changed every password I had on a list I kept handwritten in a notebook that never left my purse. I called my bank and flagged the account for extra verification. I called the attorney in Chattanooga who was managing Hazel's estate and told him I was no longer authorizing my son as a contact on the account. I'd made that casual mention in the beginning, just thinking it would be useful to have family involved. Helen reviewed my own will and we updated it significantly. I did not call my son. The Sunday dinners stopped because I stopped accepting the invitations. I said I was tired, or under the weather, or had plans with a neighbor. He called a few times. Friendly calls, surface level. I was friendly back. I was a fifth-grade teacher. I know how to smile while I'm waiting. I waited until January. Helen had recommended I gather what documentation I could before making any formal move, and by January I had enough. The repair shop owner had given me a written report on the software. Helen had documented my account of the conversation. We filed a report with local police, not because I expected a dramatic arrest, but because Helen said it created an official record. Depending on what the remote access software had captured, there could be a case for unauthorized computer access, which under federal law is a serious matter. The morning I met with the detective assigned to the case, I brought Helen with me and a folder of documents and Hazel's letter, which I'd carried in my purse since October. The detective asked why I brought the letter. "Because this is about her, too," I said. "She trusted me with something. I'm not going to let it be taken." They interviewed my son the following week. I don't know exactly what he said. I wasn't there. What happened next was not a courtroom drama. It was messier and quieter than that, the way most real things are. My son, once he understood what had been documented, stopped pretending. There were phone calls through attorneys. There were apologies that felt like the kind you make when you're cornered, not the kind you mean. His wife cried in a message she left on my voicemail. I listened to it 3 times and then saved it in case I ever needed it. The remote access software had not resulted in any actual account breaches. I'd caught it before they'd acted on whatever they'd been planning. The police ultimately decided the evidence of intent wasn't sufficient for criminal charges, but they made clear that was a close call. And my son's attorney made clear to my son that pursuing any further action toward my finances would be a different conversation. He has not called me since February. Neither has his wife. I drove to Chattanooga on a Thursday in March, almost exactly a year after Hazel died. I let myself into her condo with the key the attorney had given me. I'd decided to keep it, at least for now, and rent it out later maybe, or use it myself. I hadn't decided. I just knew I wasn't ready to let it go. I walked through her rooms. Her books were still on the shelves. I hadn't been able to deal with those yet. I stood in her kitchen, which was small and faced a courtyard, and I made coffee in her coffee maker. I'd found her beans in the freezer, still good. And I stood there and I talked to her out loud, which I know sounds like the kind of thing a person in a movie does. But there are advantages to being 63 and living alone. There is no one to be embarrassed in front of. I told her what had happened. I told her I was angry and that I was sad and that I was okay, which was all 3 things at once. The coffee was good. She always did buy better beans than I did. I've thought a lot this year about what I would have done if I hadn't gone to their house that Wednesday. If I'd waited until Thursday as planned, if I'd left the casserole at home, brought only the glasses, not let myself in, or let myself in and been louder or any of 100 small things. I would have sat at a Christmas table and probably signed something I shouldn't have signed, because I would have thought my son was trying to help me, and because I was lonely, and because grief makes you want to believe the people around you mean well. I don't know what my son became, or if he was always this person and I didn't see it, or if $4 million does something to people that I can't explain. I have 2 grandchildren I haven't seen since November. That's the part that's hardest. They're 17 and 15 and they probably don't fully understand what their parents did, and I don't know how to hold the love I have for them against everything else. I'm working on that. Helen says it's not something you figure out all at once. I signed up in April for a volunteer reading program at an elementary school 2 miles from my house. 1st through 3rd graders, twice a week. I sit with small children who are learning to sound out words, and I help them. And sometimes they look up at me with that particular expression kids get when something clicks. And I think about Hazel buying that reading program scholarship every year, and what she was really buying was that look on a kid's face, and I have enough now to do the same, and more, for a long time. Last month, I bought myself a plane ticket to Seattle, where Hazel lived for 11 years before Chattanooga. I've never been. She always talked about the water there, the way the light comes in off Puget Sound in the morning. I'm going in June. I'll bring her letter with me, I think. Let her see the water again. $4 million. I still can't fully believe it. Not because of the amount, though the amount is staggering, but because of what it meant to give it. Hazel had no children, no one she was obligated to. She chose me. She chose 42 years of Sunday phone calls and lemon shortbread cookies and sitting together in the laundry room in 1980 trying not to laugh about a sweater. That's the thing my son never understood. He was calculating. He was making projections about what a 63-year-old woman could possibly need over what remained of her life. He was adding up the numbers. Hazel wasn't adding up numbers. Hazel thinking about the laundry room. You can't take that from me. Nobody can. It isn't in any account they could access. It's the part of the money that doesn't show up anywhere, and it's the part that matters most. I raise my coffee cup to the window of her kitchen in Chattanooga. To Hazel. To showing up. To all the years we have left to become who we're still becoming. To not signing anything at Christmas that you haven't read twice first. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in any grand philosophical way. I'm a retired fifth-grade teacher, not a philosopher, but in the small, honest way you do when you're sitting alone in a kitchen that used to belong to your best friend, holding a cup of coffee, trying to make sense of a year that rearranged everything you thought you knew. Here's what I keep coming back to. My son didn't become that person the day I told him about Hazel's money. He was already that person. The money just turned on the lights. That's the thing about character. It doesn't change under pressure. It reveals itself. Every choice he'd made before, the efficiency, the planning, the way he always needed to be the one who knew best, those weren't bad things on their own. But somewhere along the way, underneath all of it, there was a calculation running that I hadn't seen. And when $4 million entered the equation, the calculation came to the surface. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I think it's important to be honest about what actually happened, rather than the softer version where I tell myself he just made a mistake, or got confused, or didn't really mean it. He meant it. He researched it. He had a timeline. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. What I learned about myself is harder to sit with. I almost let it happen. Not because I was naive. I've been around long enough to know that money changes things, but because I was lonely and grieving, and I wanted my family around me so badly that I wasn't asking the right questions about why they were suddenly so present. Grief does that. It makes you grateful for any warmth, even warmth with an agenda. What saved me was the same thing that made me a decent teacher for 31 years. I pay attention. I notice when something doesn't add up. I notice the pause on the phone. I notice the financial advisor name sent within the hour. I notice the conversation drifting every Sunday in the same direction. I didn't act on it fast enough, but I noticed. And when I finally heard it said plainly in his own words, I didn't talk myself out of what I'd heard. Trusting yourself is harder than it sounds, especially when the person you're doubting is someone you love. But trusting yourself, really trusting what you see and hear and feel, not what you wish were true, is the only tool that works when everything else is uncertain. Hazel knew that about me before I did. She wrote in her letter that I was the one who always showed up. I think what she meant was that I showed up honestly. I didn't pretend things were fine when they weren't. I didn't look away from hard things. I brought lemon shortbread cookies and I sat in the room and I stayed present with whatever was true. I'm trying to do the same thing now, even when what's true is that I haven't spoken to my son in months and I don't know when or whether that changes. I'm trying to stay present with my grandchildren, even at a distance, in whatever small ways I can. I'm trying to show up for strangers' children in a reading program on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, because Hazel believed in that kind of showing up, and now I have the means to honor it. Whatever you're navigating right now, whoever you're deciding whether to trust, whatever you've heard that you're not sure you believed, pay attention to what you actually know. Not what you hope, not what would be easier. What you actually know, that's not a small thing. That's everything.